The door was supposed to be locked. It was a heavy door, gray and cold, marked with a yellow strip that meant restricted and a symbol that meant Dravith only. But a maintenance cart had been left wedged against the frame that morning, and the seal had not caught, and now the door sat open by exactly the width of a small boy's shoulder. Pip was 7 years old. He had been following a beetle. He had not meant to go far. His mother was 2 corridors away, replacing a ventilation filter, and she had told him to stay near the cart. He had stayed near the cart for a long time. Then the beetle had moved, and he had followed it, and now the beetle was gone and he was standing in front of a door he had never seen before, and the air coming through the gap was cold and smelled like rain and something older than rain. He pushed the door open and went inside. The room was very large, larger than it looked from the outside. The ceiling curved upward and the light was low, blue-gray, the kind of light that made everything look like early morning. The floor was not flat. It rose and dipped in smooth mounds like frozen waves, and the walls were lined with something dark and fibrous that absorbed sound. Pip stood very still and listened. Nothing. Then he looked at the far corner. She was curled against the wall the way a dog curls in sleep, but she was not sleeping. She was enormous, not as large as the Dravith adults he had seen at the colony gates, but large enough that her folded wings, pressed flat against her sides, spread wider than Pip was tall. Her scales were dark, the color of charcoal after a fire. Her legs were tucked beneath her. Her tail curved around her body in a slow, protective loop. Her eyes were open. They were gold, deep, still gold, the color of old honey held up to light. They were pointed at the opposite wall and they were not seeing anything in the room at all. Pip looked at her for a moment. He looked at the door behind him. He looked at her again. He sat down on the floor just inside the doorway. The floor was cold through his trousers. He shifted once, crossed his legs, and then settled. He was not afraid. This surprised him a little because he had been told many times that the Dravith were proud and that their body language was difficult and that children should not approach them without an adult. But this one was not doing anything frightening. She was just very, very still in the way that sometimes hurt to look at. He thought about the beetle. He thought about what his mother was going to say when she found out where he had gone. Then he started talking. He did not talk to the dragon girl specifically. He talked the way he sometimes talked to himself when he was bored or uneasy, just letting words fill the space because silence felt heavier than sound. He said, "I had fish for lunch but I didn't finish it. It smelled weird." He said, "I scraped my knee on the cargo ramp yesterday. It's still kind of gross." He said, "There was a beetle. I don't know where it went." The dragon girl did not move. He kept talking for a while. Not about anything. He told her about the way the lights in Corridor 7 flickered every time someone used the water reclamation pump. He told her that he had tried to learn to whistle 3 times and could not do it yet. He told her that the tree on Tier 4 smelled like something good that he did not have a name for. At some point he ran out of things to say and just sat there. The quiet came back. It was a different kind of quiet than when he had first come in. Not as heavy. He was about to stand up. His legs were getting stiff when something changed. The dragon girl's eye moved. Just one eye, just slightly. The gold pupil, which had been aimed at the far wall, rotated a few degrees toward him. She did not move her head. She did not make a sound. But for one moment the eye was pointed in his direction, and it was not empty the way it had been before. It was something. He did not have a word for what it was. Just something. Then a sound came from the doorway behind him. His mother's voice. Not a shout. She had learned not to shout in the lower corridors because it echoed badly and hurt her throat. But her voice was very tight in the way that meant she was making herself be calm when she did not feel calm. "Pip." He turned around. She was standing in the doorway with her hands pressed flat against the frame. Her face was pale. Her eyes were moving between him and the dragon girl and back again very quickly. "Come here," she said, "right now, slowly." Pip stood up. He was not in a hurry. He turned back toward the corner one more time before he left. The golden eye was still watching him. He raised one hand. A small wave, the kind he gave to people he expected to see again. Then he walked to his mother, who pulled him into the corridor and held him for a long time without saying anything. Nobody had ever brought her a stone before. The Dravith healers brought medicine in small glass tubes. They brought food in shallow trays. They brought soft instruments that they pressed near her ears and her throat and her chest, and then carried away again with the same flat expression. They did not bring stones. Pip had found it in the outer yard that morning, smooth and dark, slightly flattened on one side, warm from sitting in the sun. He had put it in his pocket without thinking much about it. Now he set it on the floor near the halfway point of the room and sat down behind it like it was an offering at a small altar. He had come back 3 times now. His mother knew. She had spoken to Director Ossel, and Director Ossel had spoken to the colony physician, and the colony physician had watched the sensor log from Pip's first visit twice in silence and then said, "Let the boy come back." So now it was official in the way that things became official when adults got involved. There were rules attached. He could not go past the halfway point. He could not touch her. He had to leave when Rena came to the door. Pip had agreed to all of this without argument because he had already been staying behind the halfway point, and he had already been leaving when his mother appeared. The rules were just the adults catching up to what he had already figured out on his own. Sara, he had learned her name from Elder Vrath, who had met Rena in the corridor and spoken to her with the careful, deliberate manner of someone translating not just words but entire ways of thinking, was in the same corner. She was always in the same corner, but today she was not curled as tightly. Her head was lifted a few inches off the ground. Her eyes were open, and they had found him faster than last time. He sat down. He looked at the stone. He looked at her. "I brought you something," he said. "You don't have to want it. I just thought it was nice." She did not respond. He had not expected her to. He told her about his morning. He told her that the beetle had reappeared in Corridor 9, which he thought was very far for a beetle to travel. He told her that his mother had made him eat the rest of the fish from yesterday, and that it was still weird. He told her about the dream he'd had where the whole colony was upside down, and everyone acted like that was normal. Somewhere in the middle of this, Sara shifted. Not a large movement. She uncurled slightly, extending one foreleg along the floor so that the claws rested near the edge of the nearest wave mound. Her head lowered again, but differently than before, not the collapse of something with no energy left, but the slow, deliberate settling of something choosing to be lower. Pip noticed. He did not comment on it. He kept talking. After a while, he ran out of words and just sat there, the way he had before. He was getting better at sitting quietly. His mother said this was not a skill he had previously demonstrated. The silence stretched. It was comfortable mostly. Then Pip asked, not loudly, just conversationally, "What's your name? Your actual one, I mean, not the one the doctors call you." Nothing for a long time. He was already mentally moving on, thinking about whether to mention the tree on Tier 4 again, when the sound came. It was very quiet. It was not a full word. It was one syllable, rough-edged, shaped in a throat that had not been used for speech in a long time. It sounded like the start of something that had been waiting a long time to begin. Pip leaned forward slightly. "Yeah," he said, "is that your name?" She did not repeat it, but her eye was fully on him now, both of them, and they were not empty the way they had been on the first day. There was something in them that he did not have a name for, but that felt, to him, like a door opening just a crack. He stayed until his mother came. When he left, he forgot the stone on purpose. Down the corridor, Rena was waiting with Elder Vrath. Vrath was a tall Dravith, older than most Pip had seen. With faded scale color near his jaw that Pip had noticed meant age the way gray hair meant age in his mother's family. Vrath was looking at his notes. Rena crouched down when Pip reached her. How was it? She said something, Pip said. Just one part of her name, I think, but she said it. Rena looked up at Vrath. Vrath was very still for a moment. Then he wrote something in his notes with the careful, deliberate motion of someone marking something important. He did not look up when he spoke. In our language, he said, the first word spoken after grief silence is called the threshold word. It means the soul has looked at the door and chosen not to go through it. He paused. We have been waiting 6 months for that word. Rena put her hand over her mouth. Pip looked back at the door to the ward. It had closed behind him. He thought about the stone sitting on the floor in there, in the half-dark, near the halfway point. He thought, she knows where I left it. She can get it if she wants. He thought that was probably enough for today. The first full sentence she said to him was, "You talk too much." Pip thought about this. "I know," he said. "My teacher says that too." Something moved near Sora*'s jaw. Not a smile. He was fairly sure Dravith faces did not smile the way human faces did. But something shifted in the muscles there, a brief involuntary thing, and it was gone before he could look directly at it. That had been 4 days ago. Since then she had said other things, always short, always with long spaces between them. She asked him once what a whistle was, and he tried to demonstrate and failed, which seemed to interest her more than a successful whistle would have. She told him, in 3 separate fragments spread across 2 visits, that the food they brought her tasted like the absence of food. He told Elder Vrath, who adjusted the nutrient formula and added something that apparently approximated a root her clutch mother used to prepare. She ate it. Not all of it, but some. The visits had begun to have a rhythm. Pip would come in and sit at his spot. It was his spot now. There was an invisible line worn into the routine of it, and he would talk for a while and then not talk, and Sora would be silent for a while and then not silent, and things moved between them in a way that neither of them had designed. Today Pip had brought half a piece of fruit, yellow, slightly wrinkled, sweet in a way that made his eyes water. He set it near the stone, which was still there, which had moved. He had noticed this on visit 4, a shift of several inches toward the wall where she slept. She had moved it herself. "The tree on tier 4, Pip said. "I think the fruit comes from it, maybe." Sora*s head turned slightly. "Describe the tree." "It's not very tall, the bark is white. The leaves are kind of see-through at the edges when the sun goes through them." He paused. "It smells really good. I don't know how to explain the smell. It's like cold but warm, like the smell of something warm that just left." Sora was quiet for a long moment. "My clutch mother planted a tree," she said slowly. "When I hatched, it is tradition. I do not know if it still stands." Pip did not say anything right away. He understood, in the way children sometimes understand things before they find words for them, that this was the most she had told him about herself, and that it had cost her something to say it. "What kind of tree?" he asked. "Root pale white bark." Her voice was very low. "She called it by my name." He thought about a tree growing somewhere with her name, and he felt something large and quiet sit down in the middle of his chest. "I think it's the same kind," he said. "Maybe not the same tree, but the same kind." She did not answer. He did not push. 3 days later, Elder Vrath came to find Rena with a form and a careful expression. He said that Sora had been cleared for a brief supervised outing to the colony's outer garden tier. He said this as though it were a routine development. His hands, Rena noticed, were not entirely still. Pip walked beside Sora through the wide corridor that connected the annex to the garden level. She moved slowly, her injured wings folded tight, her head low to clear the ceiling, her claws making a soft scraping sound on the floor that Pip found he liked. She looked at everything. The lights, the ventilation grills, a service drone that passed overhead and made her stop dead for 3 full seconds. "It's just a drone," Pip said. "It fixes things." She watched it until it turned the corner. Then she kept walking. The garden tier was not large, a rectangular open space with real soil, several planters, and one wall that was open to the plateau wind. The sky above was pale and wide. Sara emerged from the corridor and stopped just outside the doorway. She looked up. For a long moment she just stood there looking at the sky. Her wings shifted once against her sides, not opening, just pressing outward slightly, testing something. Her crest rose and then slowly settled. The wind came off the plateau and moved across the scales on her neck, and she closed her eyes. Pip stood next to her and didn't say anything. She walked to the white-barked tree without being told it was there. She stood very close to it and put her nose near the bark and breathed in, slowly, for a long time. Pip watched her and thought about her mother planting a tree and calling it by her daughter's name, and he thought this was one of the best things he had ever heard of anyone doing. Sara stood at the tree for almost 10 minutes. She did not speak. When she finally stepped back, she looked different in a way Pip could not name, not better, not whole, but slightly less far away. On the walk back, she said, "Tomorrow, I want to come back tomorrow." "Yeah," Pip said, "me too." Elder Vrath, walking behind them at a professional distance, marked the day in his log. He wrote, "Voluntary future request, first instance." He underlined it twice. What he did not write, because it was not the kind of thing that went into logs, was this. She smelled the tree, and for a moment she looked like herself. He had not seen that in 6 months. He had not been sure he would see it again. The delegation arrived on a Tuesday, which Pip thought was a very ordinary day to arrive on if you were going to change everything. There were 4 of them. 2 were administrative, Pip could tell because they carried flat data panels and looked at the walls instead of the people. 1 was a young Dravith who stayed near the back and watched everything with wide, careful eyes. The 4th was the one who mattered. His name was Elder Dovin, and he was very old, even by Dravith standards. His scales had faded to the pale gray of river stone, and he moved the way things move when they have been moving for a very long time and are in no hurry about it. He had come to take Sara home, or to formally release her, which in Dravith custom meant a different thing but was still an ending. Pip did not know any of this on Tuesday. He knew it by Wednesday, because his mother did not have a good poker face and had left 2 colony memos open on the kitchen table. He read slowly, but he read enough. He went to see Sara that afternoon as usual. He had brought something different this time, a drawing he had made with the set of colored sticks his mother had given him for his last birthday. He was not a good artist. He knew this, but he had drawn Sara anyway in the corner of her room, with the stone near her and her wings folded and her eyes open. He had colored her purple because the dark gray sticks were too small and worn, and he thought purple was a good color anyway. He set the drawing down at his spot and sat behind it. Sara looked at it for a long time without saying anything. Her head was low and her eyes moved across the paper slowly, the way her eyes moved when she was thinking rather than just seeing. "That is not my color," she said finally. "I know, the gray one was too small. I am not that large in proportion to the room. I'm not a very good drawer." She was quiet again. Then, "My foreleg is longer than that. I can fix it if you want." "No," her voice was different, not softer exactly, but less guarded. "It is accurate in the ways that matter." Pip did not entirely understand this, but he understood enough. "You can keep it," he said, "if you want." She looked at the drawing again. A long time passed. The ventilation hummed. Somewhere far away in the colony, a door opened and closed. "Can I keep it?" she said. Not a question, she said it again slightly differently, as if learning the shape of asking. Pip felt something warm settle in his chest. "Yeah," he said, "that's yours." He did not know that in the observation room above the ward, Elder Dovin was watching on the passive sensor feed. He did not know that Vrath was sitting beside the elder, not saying anything, not needing to. He did not know that Rena had asked to be present and had been allowed, and was standing in the back of the room with her arms crossed and her jaw set. What he also did not know was that earlier that day, Rena had stood in front of the colony board and said something that had surprised everyone in the room, including herself. She had said, "You're measuring the wrong things." She had said it quietly, without preparation, in the middle of Director Ossel's careful summary of the Dravith delegation's position. She had said that the elders were looking for Dravith recovery, and what they were seeing was the absence of Dravith recovery, and they were correct. It was absent. But something else was present, something that didn't have a name in either language yet. She said, "She asked to keep a drawing my son made of her. That is the first thing she has asked for since her mother died. I don't know what you call that in Dravith, but in human terms we call it wanting to hold onto something. And things that want to hold onto something are not ready to let go." The board had been quiet. Elder Dovin, who had been present via screen, had said nothing. Now he was watching the feed. He watched the small human boy sit across from the large dark creature who had not wanted anything from the world for 6 months. He watched the drawing pass between them. He watched Sora's claws curl very slowly, carefully, around the edge of the paper, not gripping it, just enclosing it, the way you hold something that you are afraid might blow away. He said to no one in particular, "She is holding it like a wing gift." Vrath looked at him. In Dravith tradition, a wing gift was what a clutch mother placed in the nest the night before a young one's first flight. Something that smelled like home, something to carry. "Yes," Vrath said, "I believe she is." Dovin stood up slowly. He looked at the screen for another moment. Then he said, "I would like to speak with the boy's mother." Rena, from the back of the room, stepped forward. "I'm here," she said. Outside in the ward, Pip was telling Sora about a dream he'd had where the stone he had brought her turned out to be a very small, very old egg, and something tiny and furious had hatched out of it. Sora made the movement near her jaw again, the brief involuntary shift of muscle that Pip had stopped trying to name and had started simply being glad about. She was still holding the drawing. Elder Dovin sat very still with his hands flat on the table and watched the observation feed with the attention of someone who has spent a long time listening to things that do not use words. Vrath sat beside him. They did not speak. Below, Pip had arrived a few minutes late. Sora had told him so. 5 minutes, she said, and he had said, "Okay, 5, and then he had sat down. She had the drawing propped against the wall where she slept. This was new. Vrath noticed it and wrote it down. "I was thinking," Pip said after a while, "about what you told me, about the tree your mom planted." Sora's crest shifted, not rising, but moving in the slow tidal way it did when she was paying close attention. "I think it's cool that she named it after you," Pip said. "Like, the tree is just growing somewhere and it has your name and it doesn't know that and it's still doing it, just by being there." Sora did not answer right away. When she spoke, her voice was very level, the flatness of someone keeping something very large and heavy very carefully balanced. "She used to sing to it," she said. "When I was small. Low songs, not words, just sound. To the tree." To me, the tree was nearby. I think she knew I could not yet hear the difference between her voice and the world. In the observation room, Dovin's hands pressed slightly flatter against the table. "That's really beautiful," Pip said. He did not say it to fill the quiet. He said it because he meant it. "She is gone," Sora said. "Yeah. The songs are gone." "Yeah." The silence came in slowly like water. Pip did not try to push it away. He sat in it and let it be there. Then he said, because it was true and because he had been thinking about it for days, "I'd be really sad too if my mom was gone. I think about it sometimes and it's the scariest thing." What happened next, Vrath would later struggle to explain in clinical language. It started in her chest. A vibration, deep, subsonic, the kind of frequency that old buildings feel in their walls before a storm. It moved upward through her throat and emerged as sound, but not speech. It was a tone that filled the chamber from floor to ceiling, that made the fibrous wall material hum at its edges, that settled in the air like something that had always been there and was only now being heard. Pip did not flinch. He sat very still, eyes wide but not frightened, listening in the way he listened to everything, completely, without judgment, like a person who is hearing something important and is giving it the space it needs. In the observation room, Dovin closed his eyes. Vrath's stylus stopped moving entirely. The grief tone, the mourning sound, the one the living made for the dead in the old tradition, not performed, not controlled, drawn up from the body by something the mind could not prevent and could not plan. Sora had not made this sound since the first morning after her clutch mother died. In its absence, the healers had understood that she was not mourning. She was frozen. Grief requires the willingness to feel the size of what is gone, and she had not been willing or able. She had gone somewhere smaller and stayed there. The tone lasted for a long time, long enough that Pip's eyes filled without him deciding they would. When it ended, the room was very quiet. And then Pip moved. Not dramatically, he did not leap up or run to her. He just shifted forward from his sitting spot, crossed the halfway line that had been his boundary for weeks, and sat down on the floor next to her foreleg. He reached up and put his small hand flat against the scales just above her ankle, the way you put your hand on someone's shoulder when there are no words that are right. He stayed there. Sora did not pull away. She breathed once, slow and long, like something that has been held under water and has finally come up. Dovin opened his eyes. He looked at the feed for a long time, the small human boy sitting against the dark creature's leg, the enormous wounded wings, the drawing propped against the far wall. He said the child gave her permission to grieve. Vrath said nothing. Dovin said, "We do not teach this. We bring them healers and ritual and the correct foods and the songs of the clan. We give them every instrument of recovery." He paused. "We do not simply sit beside them and say, 'I would be afraid too.'" He was quiet for a moment. "Then it is such a small thing." "Yes," Vrath said. "How did he know to do it?" Vrath looked at the feed. Pip had not moved. His hand was still against her leg. His eyes were dry now but still bright. "I do not believe he knew," Vrath said. "I believe he simply told her the truth." Dovin stood, slowly, the way he did everything. "I would like to revisit the timeline," he said. "There is no urgency in 3 days." He looked at the screen one more time before he left. Down in the ward, Pip's hand was still there. Sora's breathing had evened out, slow and deep. Outside, the plateau wind moved against the colony walls with a sound like something trying to get in. The grieving took 4 days. Not 4 days of the grief tone that came and went, rising sometimes in the middle of the night when the ward was dark and empty, tapering off toward morning. It came in waves, and each wave was different. One was loud. One was barely a vibration in the walls. One lasted only a few seconds and was followed by a silence so complete that Vrath, monitoring from the adjacent room, held his breath until he heard her exhale. Pip came every day. He did not try to talk as much during these 4 days. He sat at his spot past the halfway point now, the invisible line permanently gone, and he was just there. Sometimes he brought things. A new stone, rounder than the first. A folded piece of paper he had covered in very small drawings of beetles. Once he fell asleep sitting up, and Sora watched him sleep for 40 minutes and did not wake him. On the 5th morning, she ate a full meal without being prompted. Vrath documented this with 2 underlines, and then had to put his stylus down for a moment. Elder Dovin came to the ward on the 6th day. Not to observe from the room above, he came inside. He walked in slowly and stood near the entrance, very still, letting her register his presence without pressure. Sora looked at him for a long time. Her crest rose slightly and then settled. He spoke in the full formal clutch language. Pip, sitting at his spot, did not understand any of it. But he heard the weight of it, the long rolling sounds, the pauses in specific places, The way Dovin's voice dropped low on certain syllables, the way a person's voice drops when they are saying something they have been carrying for a long time. What Dovin said in that language was this. Her clutch mother had asked him before the border crossing where she died to speak her daughter's full name aloud if something happened. The full name, not the short one everyone used. The long ceremonial name given at hatching, that meant in the old tongue, she who arrives in her own time and does not apologize for it. He said the full name now. Sora did not make a sound, but something happened in her face, in the slow, deliberate movement of her inner crest, in the way her eyes went very bright for a moment, that was too large and too private to describe. Pip, watching, thought, I don't know what he said, but I think it was something her mom wanted her to hear. He stayed quiet. That felt like the right thing. Dovin left without another word. In the corridor he spoke briefly to Vrath, and what he proposed was not a return or a release, it was a continuation. Dravith healers would join the colony staff. Sara would remain in the annex with supervised access to the garden tier until she said she was ready to decide what came next. The decision would be hers. Vrath agreed before the elder had finished the sentence. The sky deck was on the highest accessible level of the colony, a wide platform open on 3 sides to the plateau wind, used mostly by survey staff and mostly empty in the late afternoon. Vrath cleared Sara for a supervised visit on the 8th day, pending the wind being mild. The wind was mild. She walked out onto the deck and stopped at the railing. Her wings were still healing. The long primary feathers, the structural ones that bore weight, would not be flight-ready for another 2 months, Vrath had said. She knew this, but she spread them anyway, slowly, carefully, until they were as wide as they would go. She stood there with her wings out and the wind moving through them and her eyes closed, and she was very still, and she was very present. Pip stood next to her at the railing. He looked out at the plateau, at the long pale stone and the distant edge where the sky began, at the thin clouds moving fast and low. Then he spread his arms. He did not do it to imitate her. He did it because it seemed like the right thing to do when you were standing somewhere high with the wind coming at you. He stretched his arms as wide as they would go, which was not wide, compared to her, and tilted his face up. And immediately the wind hit him sideways and he staggered and made a loud, undignified noise and grabbed the railing with both hands. He was fine, he was laughing. Sora looked down at him. What happened in her face was not something a human face would do. Her inner crest spread fully, slowly, the thin membranes catching the light and holding it. Her eye membrane warmed, from the pale gold of still water to the deep amber of afternoon sun coming through leaves. A low sound came from her throat, not the grief tone and not speech, something between, something that carried warmth the way the grief tone carried sorrow. Pip looked up at her. He did not know the Dravith word for this. He did not need it. She was smiling. He grinned back at her, still holding the railing, his hair still completely ruined by the wind. Next time, she said, hold on first. I know that now, he said. Behind them, Vrath stood in the doorway and wrote one word in his log, present. Then he looked up at the sky and left them there. The small boy and the dark-scaled girl with her wings open to the wind, standing at the edge of something with no name yet in either language, but that both of them had built, one quiet day at a time.